That was much easier than I thought it was going to be. Welcome to the Tabernacle and another exciting 5x15 event. I know many of you have been before. Thank you for coming back. It's a meaningful night because the energy and time and of course donations are coming to the Hands Up Foundation. And thanks to 5x15 and Rosie and Eleanor and Daisy for all your energy, wonderful energy doing that. My name's George Butler. I'm a trustee of Hands Up, and I started it with some friends about 6 years ago, and very much for the people that I'm going to talk about this evening. Finding a date for tonight's guests was quite interesting. A surgeon, a war photographer, a member of the House of Commons, a member of the House of Lords, a research fellow, and Michael Morpurgo has been. It's been a challenge, not because we're disorganised, but just because. Well, I think the thing that brought it together in the end was Syria, and that's very important to us. Tonight's guests have also been described by themselves and by others as ex-astrophysicist, Scouser, feminist campaigner, grandfather of the nation, desert island disc star, and I will leave you to work out who is who as we go along. There are some rules. Each speaker gets 15 minutes. I will be timing, although I might not be brave enough to stop David and Rosie. Please engage with us tonight. Use your phones to take photographs, to tweet at 5x15 Stories and at Hands Up Found. It's going to be filmed, so you don't need to, although it might be tempting, film large chunks of it for Instagram. And there will be a break, so there'll be a chance to buy some books for Christmas and another drink, so please do that. Now, we need to talk about Syria. It's been 8 years, and for many people on the stage tonight, and for lots of people I know here, it's a difficult thing to do. It's very easy to feel helpless. Where do you start with such an enormous problem? One of the reasons that we need to talk about Syria is because no one else is doing it. And as is so often the case in these wars, in Libya, in Iraq, in Yemen, it is the civilians who bear the greatest cost of that burden, and it will be them that are left when the international community turns their attention elsewhere. That is the case in Syria, and so it's so important just to keep thinking about them. We've got a week this week where we all remember everybody that we've lost, and similar numbers in Syria. So if nothing else, then tonight is a remembrance of that. In keeping with 5x15 Stories and with our projects in Syria and Lebanon, tonight is going to be focused on the people that we have met there, the Syrians that we know and their families. And in that respect, it's also not going to be a night where we discuss the balance of power in the Middle East or ex-colonial boundary disputes or indeed take a side. So really, the focus is on those individuals and their lives in Syria. So I'm going to start. I'm an illustrator, and I spend a lot of the time moving around the world, sitting down on the ground in places, drawing for magazines and newspapers. I focus on newsworthy issues that I think are often misunderstood or perhaps not at the forefront of our attention. Always my sole intention to record what I find, and always with the aim of doing justice to the people that I meet along the way. This man is called Mustafa. He's another artist I met in Iraq, a kinder man you could never meet. He was beaten by ISIS for drawing, also an artist beaten by ISIS for drawing the people the atrocities that he witnessed in his town. And we sat across a piece of paper whilst I draw him. It was open, unthreatening. He told me about his life, and I just think that's a huge value. It's just such a brilliant way of telling those stories. We live in an increasingly interconnected world, and yet quite often I think feel disconnected from from the other people in it. These are Bangladeshi and Pakistani immigrants who were burning the clothes and sleeping bags sent to them by European charities to stay warm in Belgrade. And at the same time, the rest of Europe is building fences and walls to keep them out. So I hope there is some value to having this slow process of sitting down with people and talking to them, and I hope it can compete in a world obsessed by photography. No offense to you, Paul, but there's a kind of immediate desire, and this is not that. It's a very slow process. These last two drawings are, before I talk about Syria, are of a leprosy clinic in Nepal, an all but forgotten disease. This girl, Gulshan, was 18. She was having the fingers on her hands removed because they'd become necrotic. They died, but they were still attached. And I include it because I think if there's a way of telling these vulnerable stories, then drawing is a way of doing that. She was awake for the whole operation and spent the entire time looking back at me whilst I tried to draw her. And I include this last slide because it still blows my mind. Perhaps it won't perhaps you can explain more about it, David. But this man was having his legs sawn off, and because it was too dangerous to do a general anaesthetic, he had a local anaesthetic. So at one end of the table, he was awake, talking to the nurses and having a seemingly nice time, and the other end, his leg was being sawn off. And so it's those moments those kind of extraordinary moments that drawing has allowed me to watch. When it comes to Syria, I think for me it's often quite difficult to talk about. They are incredibly, what often starts as a quite formal commission, it becomes incredibly personal very quickly. So I think the best thing to do is just to tell you what I saw. In 2012, I walked across the border from Turkey into Syria. A few journalists were doing that at the same time, with the aim of recording things for the British press. So you get to the border, and there's a sort of casual Turkish immigration officer, and he just hands your passport back, and then you're on your own. So 4 kilometers walk across through the old duty-free shop, down 4 lanes of traffic. It gives you an idea of how busy it was before. And then I had to go and look. I remember having to go and look for the guy to stamp the passport, and he kind of waved me on. And there's 2 flags in the distance. That's where you're aiming for. On each side is a minefield. There's a refugee camp and a bloke in a kind of watchtower. And I was sort of coming up to this gate, and I could see 2 feet sticking out from beneath it. And I remember thinking, like, what the hell am I doing here? And so sort of built up the courage to go around the corner, and there's this lad who's maybe 20, and he's wearing a kind of vest from an army surplus store. It almost looks like he's turned up to a fancy dress party without really making an effort. He's got a Kalashnikov and trainers, and he looks at me like, well, what are you doing here? And sort of waves as they do onto the next border crossing. And outside there is this sort of stuffed eagle, which is a kind of emblem of the Free Syrian Army. And inside, if any of you have been to the Middle East, you can imagine the character is Abu Yusuf. He's sort of bubbly and round. He's sitting behind an enormous desk and speaks better English than me. And he just says, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And sort of, how can we help? And so within half an hour, I was in a car with a translator going to this small town of Azaz. And this was one of the first things I saw, kind of really arrested, just stopped me in my tracks. So kids playing on a tank in this old town. The fighting had stopped 10 days before. One of them, you can't see on here, has got a new look top on. And then there's 2 old boys kind of wandered out in the evening just to see, this monstrosity in their town. And more of the same. I remember, in particular, kind of waves and the shapes that concrete makes when it's been blown up. You wouldn't believe that something so solid could be pushed into these extraordinary shapes. All the homes punctuated by missile strikes. All the car windows have got bullet holes in them. And I'm thinking, how can I possibly make this look good on a page? And whilst I was standing there, this is the same little boy from the image before, same striped top. This is Ismail, who is watering his goats in the center of the town as if nothing will stop him. It's as if he's done it every day for his life and probably is still doing it. He kind of bumbled in with his goats, the tank in the background, the broken mosque. And I guess what you don't see from the front pages, which in a way I feel in a way it's a reassuring thing to see, is that life in these places, despite often the situation, does continue. And so for me, that's a very important message to send. I met Ahmed, who had lost his right leg, his mother, and his brother 72 hours earlier, and he sat on this, lay in his bed in the children's ward. I walked in, and there were 3 beds down one side, each with a child in, each with their mother or father sitting beside them. And it was one of those moments where I guess everything you ever learnt in drawing or journalism was to get to this point, and yet when you arrive there, you don't know whether you should be drawing or leaving, or it feels almost hugely inappropriate. So I hid behind my drawing board, and that's perhaps one of the reasons why it's so kind of unfinished. I just wanted to finish and leave. I drew Mama Nazik, who's this wonderful Syrian lady, lost her son in the war, and Khalid, who she'd adopted in the refugee camp. Khalid had seen his father shot in his home, and then when they fled, his mother was pulled from a bus, and her head was cut off as he ran away. And he sat in front of me like just this unbelievable human telling that story. He was 10 when I was there, so he'd be 18 now. And I often wonder where he is and what he's doing. On the second day in Syria, I woke up slightly relieved that I'd made it through the night, and I walked outside. It was Ramadan, and there was this guy sitting on a chair. Like, I think I probably looked disgusting, maybe smelled disgusting. He was sat in like perfect white iron shirt, and he immediately ran off around the corner and got me some breakfast. He bought me a packet of vache qui rit cheese and some orange juice. And the next man that comes up to me is a guy who is called Faraz. And in true kind of Syrian spirit, he persuades me to get on the back of his motorbike. And we drive 50 yards down the road, and he kicks me off straight into a barber's shop. And I'm sat down, and there's this great game where they try and persuade me to cut my hair, and then they end up shaving my beard off. And no question that I should pay for anything. This sort of wonderful manner that they have, generosity of spirit. And of course, then we spent the day together. He showed me on the back of his bike where the government tanks came in. He showed me the prison. And it's those people, 8 years ago, that I often wonder whether they made it through the war or not. And I felt, perhaps it was naive, but I felt that I thought that I could hear in their voices when they told me these stories for the first time, or the first few times to journalists, that as they told them, they knew that it wouldn't be long before we told other people. And of course, they would then tell the world media, and then perhaps even the BBC would pick them up. And there was an expectation, I think, and one that makes me feel very sad, that surely once we all knew that it would only be a matter of time before the international community stepped in to stop their suffering. So it's been 8 years, and you can see where I'm going with this. It's been 8 years, and I think if we went back there, if you came back with me there tomorrow, on a flight to Istanbul, hour and a half to Hatay, 50 minutes across the border into Reyhanli, I'm not sure if we'd find the same people. I don't know if, except for Mama Nazik, I don't know if they're still alive, but I promise we would find the same scenes, the same places, the same characters and faces, and if there's a message tonight, I think it's for them, and it's that reason that we should continue to talk about Syria. Now,